All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, most talked about technologies out there, artificial intelligence. We're going to unpack the entire story, from how AI went from this philosophical dream, really, to a force that's completely reshaping our world. And believe it or not, it all started with one single, powerful question. Can a machine think? That's it. This one question, posed decades ago, is what kicked off the entire scientific revolution that we are all living through right now. It is, without a doubt, the very heart of the story of AI. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the early dreamers who even imagined this stuff was possible. Then we'll hop on the wild roller coaster ride of AI's history. You know, the amazing highs and the really tough lows. After that, we'll get into how it actually works, how it learns. Then we'll tackle that huge question about jobs, and finally, we'll peek into the future to see where all this is headed.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock, because to really get where AI is going, you have to understand where it came from. We're talking about a time when a thinking machine was pure science fiction, more about imagination than about computer code.
The 1950s were, and I mean this, absolutely foundational. It all kicks off in 1950 with Alan Turing. He asks, look, how would we even know if a machine was thinking? And that leads to his famous test. Just 6 years later, a guy named John McCarthy literally gives the field its name, artificial intelligence. And then, almost immediately after that, Frank Rosenblatt builds the perceptron. Think of it as the earliest, most basic version of a neural network. The ball was officially rolling.
And of course, behind these big moments were some truly brilliant people. You had Turing, who gave us the philosophical framework. You had McCarthy, who gave the whole field a name and a mission. And then you have Geoffrey Hinton. Now, you want to remember that name, because his work on how machines could learn, well, it wouldn't become a game changer for decades. But these guys, they built the bedrock for everything that came next.
But progress here was not a straight line. Not at all. The history of AI is this dramatic story of incredible hype, followed by some pretty crushing disappointments, and then these quiet breakthroughs that changed everything. Back in the 60s, the excitement was just off the charts. You had things like ELIZA, a chatbot that could hold these surprisingly human-like conversations, and Shakey the robot, who wasn't just following commands, it could actually see and reason about its environment. For a minute there, it really felt like the future had arrived.
But here's the thing. The hype just got way ahead of the actual technology. And when all those grand promises didn't really pan out, the funding dried up and interest just vanished. These periods became known as the AI winters, times when it felt like the whole field was just frozen in place.
And then, in the mid-'80s, things started to change. Remember Geoffrey Hinton? Well, his work on a technique called backpropagation turned out to be the secret sauce. To put it simply, it gave AI a way to learn from its own mistakes, kind of like how we learn not to touch a hot stove. This breakthrough was the spark that reignited the whole field and totally set the stage for the modern AI we have today.
So that gets us to the really big question, right? How on earth does a machine actually learn anything? Well, the core idea is actually inspired by the most powerful learning machine we know of, our own brains.
And the comparison is pretty fascinating. Our brains have billions of interconnected neurons that fire off signals. An artificial neural network kind of mimics that with digital nodes. These nodes are all connected, passing data back and forth, and the strength of each connection is called a weight. You can think of it as how important the signal from one node is to the next. It's all organized in layers. You start with the input layer, which just takes in the raw data, let's say all the pixels in a photo. That data then gets passed through one or more hidden layers, and this is where the real magic happens. Each layer looks for more and more complex patterns. So one layer might spot simple edges, the next identifies shapes, and the next might recognize a nose and ears. And finally, the output layer gives you the answer. This is a cat.
So, how does it get good at telling cats from dogs? It's a learning loop. Think of it like learning any new skill. First, the network makes a guess. Then it checks the answer key. If it guessed dog, but the photo was a cat, it sends a signal backward through the whole network, basically saying, hey, that was wrong, and it adjusts all those little connection weights that led to the bad guess. Now, imagine doing that process millions and millions of times. It just keeps fine-tuning itself until it gets incredibly accurate.
Okay, so now that we've got a handle on how these things learn, we can finally tackle one of the biggest, most talked about fears around AI. What's it going to do to our jobs? Are the robots coming to take over? I mean, this is the question on everyone's mind, and for good reason. When you have a technology that can write, that can code, that can create art, it's totally natural to wonder where humans fit in. But the data shows that the reality is a lot more nuanced than just a simple robot takeover.
Some really great research from Harvard Business School suggests we should think about it as two different forces. On one side, you've got automation, which is when AI straight up substitutes for human tasks. That's displacement. But on the other side, you have augmentation. That's when AI works with a human, almost like a superpowered assistant, making us way more productive.
And you can see this playing out in the real world. Just look at this data on US job postings after generative AI hit the scene. The jobs that were really prone to automation, yep, they saw a 17% drop. But, and this is the fascinating part, the jobs that could be augmented by AI, the ones where it could help, demand for those actually jumped by 22%. So it's not just taking things away, it's also creating new needs and boosting other roles.
So, with all that in mind, what does the future actually look like? What happens as AI gets more and more woven into the very fabric of our daily lives?
Well, looking out to 2035, experts are predicting that AI is going to be as common and essential as Wi-Fi is today. It'll be the invisible backbone of pretty much every industry, making things like supply chains and healthcare way more efficient and resilient. It'll even help us tackle big problems like climate change by optimizing energy use. But of course, with all that power comes a huge need for strong ethical rules to make sure it's all used responsibly.
And I think this quote really nails it. We're not at the finish line here. The AI revolution isn't an endpoint. It's a launchpad for whatever comes next. It's forcing us to constantly think bigger and push the boundaries of what we even think is possible.
And that kind of leaves us with one final big thought. We are just getting our heads around the incredible power of AI today. But technology never, ever stands still. As we start to master this, we have to wonder, what's the next frontier? What new revolution, maybe something wild like quantum computing, is already waiting just over the horizon, ready to start this whole incredible cycle all over again?